Well, howdy, folks, and welcome to Vitruvian Book Review number 17. So, if you're new to the channel, here's the deal. What I'm doing is I have set a goal for myself to read no less than 52 books in 2021 and to hold myself accountable and hopefully share a little bit with you as to what I'm reading, things that I think are good. I can give you some ideas as to something that you may want to put into your library. I've created the Vitruvian Book Review as part of the Vitruvian Project, which is my endeavor to improve always in all ways. This week's book was a good one. I knew it was going to be good. I was actually on the pre-order list for this one because it's from one of my favorite authors, thought leaders, podcasters, entrepreneurs, James Altucher. I actually consider James a virtual mentor. What that means is that James and I have never met. We probably never will. He has no idea who I am. He probably never will. But I watch his work, I read what he writes, and I've been able to learn quite a bit from James as a virtual mentor. And that's just kind of a sidebar. If you don't have virtual mentors, I suggest you go out and find people you admire, you respect, you just like the work that they're putting out, and study them. It's almost better than having a real mentor in some degree because one, most of the things that they print and they talk about, it's their best work. It's the nuggets that you would want to get to if you had the chance to take them to coffee or something like that. And so go find a group of people that you respect and learn from them. All right, well, let's get into this. So Skip the Line, which here it is. This is the book that I'm going to be talking about today. And the book is a guide to doing things in a more strategic way than have been done before. So here's a great example of skipping the line. Whenever I was coming up through undergrad, I was a communications journalism major, and I wanted to, at the time, I thought about possibly going into broadcast journalism. Well, back then, here's what the line looked like. You had to go to some podunk market and probably start on an AM radio station doing reporting. That means you had the microphone, you had the camera, you went out, you grabbed stories about Betty Jo Bumfield turning 88, you do the report, you go back to the studio, you edit everything, you're recording or whatever, and you report on it, and hopefully you end up getting on camera, then you send out demo tapes everywhere, with the hope being going from a really tiny market to a little bit bigger market to maybe a mid-tier market. And by then, most people are, kind of falling out because they realize they just don't have the staying power. It was that line, if you jumped in that line, it was a long, long line, and there really was no fast pass for it. So the idea of skip the line is, okay, let's say that you want to be an anchor, a newscaster, or something to that effect, sticking with the theme that I'm giving you as from my undergrad days. Well, now, if you wanted to, you could go to something like Ecamm Live, you could go to StreamYard, and you can basically create a news studio in your home and start doing daily reports. My wife has actually started watching this girl, and I wish I could remember the name of her channel on Instagram so I could give her a shout out just because I admire what she's doing. That's what she's done. She has basically started just giving news reports into her phone on Instagram. My wife, who could care less about current events, the news, or anything like that, she's an entrepreneur herself. She worries about us, our home, and her business, and that's it. But she watches this girl give her news reports. So that's an example of skipping the line. And, there's a chance that she might get either picked up by a larger news outlet, or maybe she just keeps doing what she's doing in that space, and she grows her channel, she grows her audience, she does a newsletter, she writes a book, she starts doing a quarterly report, she does a paid for subscription newsletter, she monetizes her news channel. She has skipped the line. She never had to do an internship at CNN or a local news station. That's what this is about. Another thing that James really touches on quite a bit is this idea that, unlike Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule, where, to be an expert at anything, you pretty much have to put in 10,000 hours. And if you put in that 10,000 hours, then you will, in fact, at least develop a skill set that makes you an expert in a certain area. You will master, say, if I want to play the guitar, if I'm just willing to put in 10,000 hours of work learning to play the guitar, then I will, in fact, be a good guitar player. Well, James takes a different approach. He is big on experimentation, 10,000 experiments. And so I really wanted to hone in on that first because I think it's definitely one of the big ideas. It's early in the book, and it's something that I think that if you want to be an entrepreneur, and let's say you have a quote unquote real job right now, just because you want to go out on your own doesn't mean that you have to just burn your ships and go right away, give up your day job. It's all in or nothing. And that doesn't have to be that way. Here's what James talks about. He talks about like doing experimentation. So let me take you through this real quick. So first of all, to decide whether an experiment is worth doing or not, here is James's little formula. Here's the litmus test to say, okay, is this experiment worth pursuing to find out what I need to know? So let me get this where I can make you see my little whiteboard here. Okay, first of all, easy to set up. That's one of the first things that you should check out. So going back to, I'm going to shift gears from my newscaster experiment. I'm going to talk about my daughter, who's a senior at Alabama, who wants to be in sports broadcasting. I suggested to her, and she's got like over 5,000 followers on Instagram. So I told her what she should do is start building an audience, specifically a sports audience for the University of Alabama. Quite a few fans out there. And build that audience so that one day she could, in fact, take that audience to ESPNU, a local sports department, a sports marketing department, whatever the case. Can you imagine some beautiful, I'm biased, but there's some beautiful 21-year-old girl showing up to your news station with 5,000 followers that watch her reports on the University of Alabama's football games, baseball games, basketball games, whatever the case may be. That's something that is of value. She has equity in that audience. So what I've told her she should do is easy to set up. Take a portion of her audience and start marketing herself to them. She's already got the platform, Instagram, 5,000 plus followers. She could start marketing herself as a sports enthusiast. So easy to set up. Now, little downside. This is the next one. If you're going to try to experiment with something different, check the downside. So let's say that you have always wanted to, you want to write a book, but you're an accountant and you work for a large CPA firm. So quitting that job and taking all your savings and locking yourself up in some wooded scenario setting like on Walden or something and collecting your thoughts and writing for a year, that's a big risk. However, you don't have to do that, right? What if you just started writing 1,000 words every single day, you schedule it, and you go, I'm going to experiment. I'm going to see if by writing, if I take my idea for a book and I write on it for 1,000 words minimum every single day for 365 days, what may come of it? I might have a book and I can publish it on Amazon. Self-publishing is bigger than it's ever been. It's easier than it's ever been. It's more cost effective. So, little downside. Writing 1,000 words a day, it's keeping your job, getting your book written, very little downside, and you start an experiment to see if, in fact, you are a writer. Now, huge potential upside. Okay, so let's say that my daughter, going back to her, let's say that she takes that audience that she's developed, she has started doing like reports on game day. So let me tell you something. She lives within like a couple of blocks of Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa. So she could literally go start walking up and interviewing parents, longtime fans, season ticket holders, other students. How funny. I think there's actually a kid on Instagram that does that. He goes around Tuscaloosa and interviewing all the drunk kids on game day. She could do that. And so there's huge potential upside for her to take that audience and get noticed, right? And what's the downside? I can't see it in that, as long as she keeps it clean, she doesn't do anything, doesn't put anything stupid out there. There's huge upside though, which is she builds this audience, she builds a huge following, and now all of a sudden she has this grand audience that she can take and monetize and again, take it elsewhere. So something unique. Okay, so, one of the things kind of to cross-pollinate themes that's in the book is unique. James has a chapter in here that he talks about being not just good at, but being the only one in a market doing a thing. An example he gives is of his daughter, who's very bright, 4.0 student, very involved in extracurriculars, but she wasn't getting into the schools that she wanted to. I mean, right now, college is so stupid with how hard it is to get into American universities. And, I'm with James Altucher on this. I just don't know that the value is there anymore. I know the ROI is definitely not there. The economics are completely out of whack, but I digress. So when she wasn't getting into the schools that she wanted, James said, okay, let's take a year off. Find something that you really, really love and try to be the only one instead of just being good at something. She was already a good student competing with thousands and thousands of other good students. So what she did, she pursued race car driving. That's right. So James Altucher has a daughter that loves race car driving. So she went and started taking driving lessons to become a certified race car driver. I have absolutely no idea what that means. I don't remember Cole Trickle having to get a certification in Days of Thunder, but maybe there was something I missed. So anyway, she is now a certified race car driver. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe either I heard on his podcast or it's in the book, she ended up getting accepted to Duke, because how many other female certified race car drivers are out there, right, that are applying to go to Duke, that have good grades? So this was something that set her apart, right? So that's what he's talking about. So unique. Be unique. Figure out a way to do so. Go where no one is. That's one of the things that Babe Ruth always says. Like, he hits the ball where they ain't. Well, they're not on the other side of the fence. There's no players on the other side of the fence. That's where he hit the ball, and that's why he was so successful. James makes the point here too. It's like, don't go and try to compete in a crowded area. Go find something unique that no one else is doing and do that thing and be known for that thing. And then guess what? Most likely, if you're into it, there is an audience out there. None of us are that unique. Most humans, there's an audience somewhere with similar interests. So go find that thing, and it causes you to stand out. It'll open doors for you. James talks about how being a chess player has opened more doors. It helped him get into school, helped him get jobs, helped him get noticed. He is a bright guy, but he's also a very humble guy. And he says, hey, look, it makes people think I'm a lot smarter than I probably am, because most people assume that if you're a really good chess player, then you're really smart. So find something unique. Next, okay, here's the deal with the experimenting. It's going to happen no matter what, whether it's successful or not. You learn something right there. So I often get frustrated at some of the business endeavors that I have pursued that have not worked out the way that I wanted them to. But you know what? In each and every one, I learned something. Going back to the argument of college versus no college. So Tim Ferriss has famously said numerous times that he considered going to business school, and he was kind of on a path. He thought that's what he was probably going to do. And Tim Ferriss is a bright guy, Princeton undergrad. I think he said, I don't know if he was accepted, but I think his idea was to go to Stanford Business School. And then he made the cognitive decision that I thought about it. I was actually self-employed at the time that I went back to graduate school for my MBA. I just wasn't smart enough or gutsy enough to go, no, do this instead. But Tim said, what could I do with that capital? Instead of spending it on more education, what if I took that same money and started a business? Okay, so he did that. And one of the things that whenever he was making that decision, he said, worst case scenario, I get an education either way. The only difference is one of them is real life experience. One of them has a real business with real revenue, with a real P&L, with real customers, with real revenues attached to it. The other doesn't. So, whenever you do these experiments, there's really no downside. James he writes in the book about whenever, and I remember when he talked about this on his podcast, about how he put together a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter account. I think that's what it was, not GoFundMe. It was a Kickstarter account, if I'm not mistaken, to gather people up to go buy Greenland. Okay, I think this is whenever Trump had made some comment about, buying Greenland or whatever. And so James just thought, well, that'd be a good idea. What if I could put enough money together to go buy Greenland? It might have been Iceland, but I'm pretty sure it was Greenland. And so he talks about how he went through that exercise, and it was just an experiment for him. And with every experiment, he's learned something along the way. So there's really no downside. Another experiment that he did that I thought was really bold and cool, he's always wanted to do stand-up comedy. So when he was testing his comedic skills and everything, one of the first things he did was he went to a New York subway, okay? Went to a subway car and started doing stand-up for these strangers. Now, first of all, that just takes yays to do that. Secondly, it's like those people didn't pay to hear him do his stand-up. So this is a harsh audience. And he did it and he learned. It was an experiment. Can I just make people that aren't expecting it laugh? But here's the other thing too. The jokes that did work, well, my gosh, if they will work on a group of people on a subway cart in New York, then most likely they are going to work in a nightclub, right? So therefore, again, let's look at it. Easy to set up. A subway ticket, stand there, start speaking. Little downside. What's the worst that could happen, right? They boo him. They tell him to sit down and shut up. Huge potential upside. He could have learned some of the greatest jokes and overcoming the fear and the confidence that he gained from that. And he didn't have to go to an open mic. The audience is there. He's there. Boom. He's up. He's on stage. He created the stage. Unique. He's doing stand-up on a subway. Learned something. He learned what jokes work. He learned what jokes didn't. And he learned how to work a very, very interesting sort of audience. So with that, there's all sorts of things like that. If you're out there and you're looking to pursue a passion, whether it's an entrepreneurial venture or anything of that nature, I write about my escape from corporate America and Push Play, Taking Your Life Off Pause. You can check that out at Amazon. My book is about what it's like to make that transition and get yourself prepared for it. Altucher, obviously, much more prolific writer. I highly recommend this book. I recommend my book too, but this one is for somebody that wants to do that. If you want to step out, not only does it give you some tips and some suggestions of how to make that leap outside and why it makes sense to prepare and do things right now, especially in this new economy, to figure out ways to navigate and be ahead of the game and create value and equity within yourself to get what James calls micro skills, to understand that whenever you're doing big processes, you're picking up little micro skills that you can take in different areas. So it's really good for anyone that's ever thought about being an entrepreneur. And I'm telling you right now, more than ever, it is an incredible time to be alive, and I can't imagine a better time to try to be an entrepreneur. I know that sounds crazy with all that we see going on in the world, but this is really an amazing time to be alive. And it's books like this that I tell you what I like most about this book, probably as I really think about it, is James not talking about all the business adventures that he's pursued. Some that he just never should have. I mean, when he talks about how he became a hedge fund manager, I'm like, that's nuts. I mean, he was not a finance guy at all. But he talks about his failures. James has famously gone from boom to bust numerous times. And he's very vulnerable in how he talks about that evolution, to the point where now he's successful, he's flush, but he's more than anything, he's content. And he has a very sound view of himself, the world around him, and how to navigate these weird and sometimes troubling waters we're in. So I cannot more highly recommend this book for anyone who has failed and you think you're down and out. And, as a reminder, like Zig Ziglar always said, failure is an instance, it's not an identity. James can show you that. The guy has failed and failed and failed and failed, and yet he keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. And along the way, he learns something each and every time. It has just some good practical advice. 10 rules for living a good life, which I love. That was one of my favorite parts of the book, which is just kind of basic good information. He liked talking about how in Okinawa, Japan, which has the highest percentage of centenarians, people over 100 years old in the world, and they're not sick in bed. They're actually active, and the reason why is because they practice something called, forgive me, I'm probably gonna butcher this pronunciation, but I don't speak Japanese, harahachi bon mi, which means eat 80% of your capacity. That's one of the 10 rules for a good life. In other words, just don't overeat. Eat 20% less than what you really have to, because that's probably enough. Read. This channel, hey, read. Obviously, I bought in. You're so lucky. Most people don't read. And isn't that the truth? How many people did you bump into? If you're watching this, you're watching a book review, obviously you're probably a pretty voracious reader. Most people around you don't read. And he writes, most people don't read. Those people are losers. If you read one good thing a day, then in a few years, you'll know 1,000 more things than anyone else, which that kind of touches on kind of his get incrementally better each and every day. If you just get 1% better each and every day, the compounding effect of that is astounding. So he talks about that in the book, how to just improve daily. Great book. There you go. Can't more highly recommend it. Let me get a sip of my coffee here. That's my dad. Read the book. It's great. I highly recommend it. Number 17, the Vitruvian reading list. And hey, please go out to Jason Right Now, my name, now, N-O-W, jasonrightnow.com, and sign up for the Vitruvian letter. I would really appreciate it. It's my free newsletter. It's short, it's concise. It just talks about some of the things that I'm pondering, that I'm experimenting with, maybe some scientific research that I have that I found that I find fascinating. Right now, I'm studying a lot with the vaccines. I want to know, why so many people are opposed to it, those who are all in on it, why, and kind of what the truth is somewhere there, probably in the middle as to what the reality is on it. I want to learn. There's just a lot surrounding the vaccine. So I think the latest issue, I'll kind of talk about where I'm gathering my information. I will not give you my opinion. I don't even tell you whether I've been vaccinated or not. That's not the key. I'm not trying to persuade anybody. I'm just trying to show people how I've kind of navigated the waters of the whole vaccine issue. And then also, I would be grateful if you would consider picking up a copy of my book, Push Play, Taking Your Life Off Pause, where I discuss when I was 28 and I bought my first company, kind of what that was like and the benefits, the pitfalls of that, the ups, the downs, and everything in between that came with that little maneuver. And with that, please subscribe to the channel and come back here and check out next week review number 18 of 2021, which is going to be Abundance by Stephen Kotler, one of my favorite authors. Thank you for checking out the channel. Thank you for listening to this long review. I apologize it was so long, but I just love James's writing. So with that, go crush your day and keep reading. It's exercise for your brains. We need more readers. Thanks.